I was gone for about 40 minutes. Just a quick trip to the hardware store. When I pulled back into my driveway, the first thing that caught my attention was the front door. It wasn't fully shut. It was slightly open, just a couple of inches. That alone felt off. I clearly remembered closing it before I left. Then I heard voices coming from inside my house. At first, I thought maybe I had forgotten that someone was supposed to stop by, but as I got closer, I could hear two people talking about property compliance and documenting violations. That's when it clicked. These weren't friends or guests. They were HOA staff, standing inside my living room, looking around like they owned the place. And the craziest part? I'm not even part of their HOA, which meant the conversation that was about to happen was going to get uncomfortable very quickly. The strange thing is, my neighborhood doesn't even have an HOA, at least not the section where my house is located. The development right next to us does. Same builder, same style homes, even the same entrance road. But about halfway down the street, the HOA boundary ends. My house sits just outside that line. That was actually one of the main reasons I bought it in the first place. No dues, no architectural approvals, no letters about what color my mailbox should be. When I finalized the purchase, the title paperwork made it completely clear. The property was not part of the association. The previous owner even mentioned it casually during the walkthrough, saying, "You get the neighborhood without the HOA headaches." And for the first year, that's exactly how it was. The HOA board managed the neighborhood behind us. Their pool, their clubhouse, their rules. But they never bothered anyone on our side of the street. We waved each other, borrowed tools occasionally, just normal neighbor interactions. Then a new HOA president took over. Within a few weeks, people started talking about stricter enforcement within the association. Parking restrictions, yard maintenance rules, fence approvals, all the usual HOA stuff. Still, none of that applied to me, or at least it wasn't supposed to. A couple of months before the day I walked into strangers inside my home, I started receiving letters in my mailbox. HOA notices. At first, I assumed it was just an error. The envelopes had the HOA logo and were addressed to my house number, but the content talked about member compliance and community regulations. I emailed the management company, and they replied saying they would look into the address. After that, the letters stopped, so I assumed the issue had been fixed, which is why the last thing I expected that afternoon was to walk into my house and find two HOA staff members moving around inside like they were conducting an inspection. Whatever confusion they had about the address before, this time they had crossed a line that wasn't even remotely within their authority. When I pushed the door open completely, both of them turned and looked at me like I was the one interrupting something. One of them was holding a tablet. The other had a clipboard. They were standing right in my living room, looking around and taking pictures inside my house. For a moment, I just stood there trying to process what I was seeing. Then I asked the obvious question, "What are you doing in my house?" The guy with the tablet said they were with the HOA and were conducting a compliance inspection, as if that explanation made everything perfectly normal. I told them my property wasn't part of the HOA. He shook his head and said the home had been flagged for unapproved exterior modifications, and that they were also documenting the interior condition. Interior condition. That's when my patience started running out. I asked how they had even gotten inside. The other guy said the front door was unlocked when they arrived, and that they had authorization from the association to inspect the property. Authorization from the association. I told them that didn't mean anything here. This house isn't in their neighborhood. I don't pay their fees. I'm not under their rules. And even if I were, nobody has a right to just walk into someone's home whenever they feel like it. Both of them started looking a lot less confident once that reality set in. The guy with the tablet explained that the HOA president had personally given them the address and told them the property was part of the community. That's when everything started to make sense. The letters from a few months back, the address confusion email. Apparently, the mistake had never actually been corrected. Instead, someone had chosen to double down on it. I told them they needed to leave immediately. They didn't argue, but they didn't exactly hurry either. The guy with the clipboard mentioned they still needed to finish documenting a few things outside. I shut that down right away. At that point, This wasn't some HOA misunderstanding anymore. This was two strangers walking through my house and taking pictures without permission. And that's the kind of situation where you stop debating policies and start making calls. So I stepped outside, pulled out my phone, and called the local sheriff's office. Not to create a scene, but to make it absolutely clear where their authority ended. Because if the HOA president thought she had control over my property before, she was about to learn exactly how far that control didn't reach. The sheriff's deputy arrived about 10 minutes later. By then, the two HOA staff members were standing near the driveway beside their truck, speaking quietly. You could tell they were getting uneasy. What had probably felt like a routine inspection earlier now looked very different. The deputy stepped out of his cruiser and asked what was going on. I explained everything from the beginning. I told him I came home to find two people inside my house taking photos and claiming they had authority from the HOA to inspect the property. Then I added the key detail that made the entire situation ridiculous. My house isn't even part of their HOA. The deputy walked over and spoke with them briefly. One of them handed him the work order on the tablet. It listed my address and referenced an HOA compliance inspection authorized by the association president. The deputy read it, looked back at the address, and asked them a simple question. Did the homeowner give you permission to enter the house? They both shook their heads. One of them tried to explain that the HOA president had told them the property was part of the association and that they had the right to inspect violations. The deputy didn't argue. He simply said HOA rules do not override private property law. Then he pointed at my house and said, "That's his home. You don't walk into it without permission." You could see the realization hit them instantly. This wasn't an HOA matter anymore. This was trespassing. The deputy asked him to step away while he made a quick call to verify the property records. A few minutes later, he returned and confirmed exactly what I had been saying all along. My property sits outside the HOA boundary and always has. The address had been incorrectly listed in their internal system, meaning the HOA president had sent them to inspect a house they had no authority over. At that point, the deputy told them clearly to leave the property immediately. Any disputes about boundaries or ownership could be handled through proper legal channels. But entering someone's home based on a mistaken assumption of HOA authority was completely unacceptable. They packed up quickly after that. No more photos, no more notes, just an awkward apology about following instructions. Before they left, the deputy added one final comment. If the association contacted me again about inspections, they should probably double-check their maps first, because the authority they thought they had that day never actually existed. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the HOA management company. The subject line read, "Address correction notice." After the sheriff confirmed the records, someone at the association had finally checked the county parcel map themselves. It took them about 5 minutes to confirm what I had been saying the entire time. My house had never been part of their HOA. Not when it was built, not when I bought it, not ever. The address had simply been mistakenly added to their records years earlier when the neighborhood expanded. That meant every letter, every violation notice, and that entire inspection attempt had all been based on a single mistake that somehow lasted for months. The email said they were removing my property from their records immediately and apologized for any inconvenience caused. Inconvenience. That was a generous way to describe two strangers walking through my home. But at least the situation was finally resolved. A few days later, I ran into a neighbor who actually lives within the HOA. He told me the board meeting that week had been tense. The sheriff's visit had made its way back to the HOA president very quickly. Turns out when you send staff to inspect a property outside your authority, and it ends with law enforcement involved, people start asking questions. A lot of questions. From what I heard, the association quietly updated their property list, clarified the neighborhood boundaries, and made it clear that future inspections would require confirmed addresses first, which, honestly, sounds like common sense to begin with. As for my house, the letter stopped completely. No more compliance notices, no more inspections, no more confusion about who actually had authority over property. And in the end, the whole situation served as a simple reminder. HOAs have rules, but those rules only apply to the people who are actually part of them. The moment they try to enforce those rules outside their own boundaries, they're not running an HOA anymore. They're just trespassing.